Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first roundtable in relation to the build that we're going to be discussing called Fire on the Rising Sun. We're going to get introduced to the guests and we're going to get right on it. We are live. I may have mucked up the times a little in that I did actually tell everybody, I think I'm right in saying this, to be here for 3 o'clock GMT time. But I scheduled the video itself for 4 o'clock. So I changed it thinking, oh, what an idiot. And as you can see, we are missing someone. So maybe I did the email wrong and not that, I don't know. We'll see. But at the moment, we've got 2 of our guests. Graham will not be with us that I'm aware of at the moment because unfortunately he's been taken ill. He's fine, just a bit of a sickness bug, which is a real gutter. And I'm sure he'll be watching and in the chat at some point if he's awake and capable. And the lovely Bill will be joining us shortly. He'll find out we're live and go into a panic, probably. But who we do have with us, as you can see, we have Rob. Hi, Rob.
Hello.
So Rob Herring is our what? I'm going to embarrass you also while I do this, so I do apologise. But for me personally, Rob is my figure guru. Just someone I know is very, very good at figures, well known in the community as well for painting and all that sort of stuff. And the other guest we got with us is Martin. You right, Martin?
Yeah. Good morning from Utah.
So Martin, the reason he actually responded to my request for him to come and join in with yeah, I'd love to, but I'm quite sure why you want me. And the reason for that is he's quite new to the community and model making in some respects. But I find his work very, very inspirational. So, and he's going leaps and bounds at a very fast pace. So I thought his view on the madness that we're going to uncover and go through over the next however long, he might have an aspect or look at the project in a slightly different way to others. So that's why we've got the people we've got here. Bill Huffman, who will be with us shortly when he arrives, is well known in the community for his imagination and his dioramas and the madness that ensues from a grain of an idea into a full-blown series of books before he's even started the actual model. So there. So the reason for this is just give you a little bit of background, obviously, for those that may not know or should know or forgotten or just hoping I don't say it again. Coming up in exactly 3 days' time is my year anniversary of my triple bypass and heart operation. And I vowed that I would do a diorama. And that diorama was from a kit that had been released from Border Models. A lot of inspiration it gave me at the time. And I sat waiting for this operation, planning a diorama, not knowing how big it might turn out to be. But I planned different elements and bits and pieces. And during my recovery over the last year, I decided that this would be called my recovery build. And I wanted to start it, and eventually thought, no, I'm going to leave it for the year anniversary. So that's where we're at too. The really weird part is that I have tried to back out of it a few times, been told off by my close friends that I shouldn't and do it. And it wasn't until the moment where I started doing the research, which anyone that knows me knows I can't stand doing research, that I found that this actual incident that will be part of the diorama happened on exactly the same time and date as my operation. So it seemed to be telling me that, oh, well, can't get out of it now because there's too much going on that's connected. And that diorama will be basically a slice or a cut part of an aircraft carrier from the Second World War, from the Battle of Midway. It's the Japanese Akagi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's the moment where the single bomb, I must emphasize that the single hit from an American hell diver pierces through the flight deck into the hangar and explodes. And the fire that comes from that cripples the ship, and under 24 hours later is abandoned and torpedoed and sunk to the bottom of the sea, obviously. So that's what we'll be building, or I will be building. These guys don't know it yet, but they're going to be part of the story in the fact I'm going to be asking them all the time, how do we do this? However, I have shared with them this picture, so they know roughly what I'm going to be doing, and I'll share it with you now. So this is an AI-generated picture of the scene that I want to try and create. Now, there's lots of elements of this is not correct. It is purely there to give you an idea as to what I want to achieve. Part of the reasons it's incorrect is because where the explosion is incorrect on factually. The fire itself, I won't be modelling to a point. I'll explain that a bit later. And obviously, size-wise, the whole of the ship was much wider than one airplane. So there's lots going on in the picture that gives you an idea of what we're going to be doing, or I'm going to be trying to attempt, and the different elements in which is going to be needed. So I will be doing the flight deck and the island that you can see there. I will be doing the hangar deck, the first hangar deck and the second hangar deck, and nothing further, because there are decks underneath, etc. But that gives you a rough idea of what we're trying to achieve. So that gives you a bit of an inkling and an idea of where we're going with this particular discussion. We're going to be discussing how some crazy idiot model maker is going to actually achieve that. And we're going to pick the experts' brains as to what we need to think about when we're doing it, or maybe how they might approach the idea. So, talking about experts, I suppose it's only fair, really, to pick on Martin first. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, so those that are watching who may not know you have a bit of an idea of who you are.
Okay, so Martin Drayton, I'm a Brit who lives in Utah. Came out here to teach snowboarding, stayed, kind of. I used to build models as a kid, like most people, mostly Airfix kits, and it would be always like a little weekend project and cover it with enamel paint and then cover it in gloss paint so I could play with it. Then I stopped for the same reason everyone else stops for, and I left it for nearly 45 years. So during the lockdown, I was home. My wife was high risk, so I had to stay home. And she said, you know, you told me you used to build kits as a kid, so here I bought you one. So she got me a couple of aircraft, built those, had fun. She then bought me a tank, the original Tamiya Panther. Built that and thought it looked odd sitting on a piece of paper and it should have a base or something around it. So I Googled how to build dioramas and I started building dioramas. And here we are 5 years later, and that's all I spend my free time doing is building dioramas.
Cool. And a great big dioramas there as well. And you, one of the things which I like, certainly with some of the pieces of which you've done, you do something slightly different to a lot of people. You choose subjects that aren't necessarily covered very well as well, which I think is probably where I sort of share some of the thought processes that you make, is because I don't like to be doing the same sort of Sherman as everybody else. That's you know, I've got to do something a little bit different. Yeah. So yeah. Cool. Okay, and then obviously we've got Rob here. Rob, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm Rob Herring. I'm British, and I've been modelling almost non-stop since I was a teenager, or maybe even about 10 years old. So we had, you know, I think I encountered Francois Berlinden and Star Wars all at the same time. So those kind of things all came together. I lived in a town on the east coast of England that also had Hannants, which some of you may have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a good model shop on my doorstep. I also had a really good branch of the British Model Soldier Society. And that kind of, when I found that, kind of steered me into figures. And I guess, comic books and sci-fi and war movies and all that kind of stuff. It was the human element that I always liked. So hence I've been very figure orientated. I'm not prolific, but I never left the hobby in quite the same way many people do. It was always there on the periphery, so I've always kept up with what's going on. I also should say that when I discovered British Model Soldier Society, one of the guys there who became my mentor introduced me to Shep Payne books, and I was lucky enough to meet Shep Payne when I was 14, 15, I think, at BMSS annual show. So I guess that kind of inspiration at that time in your life never quite leaves you. So yeah, do figures. I sculpt them, paint them, often single figures, but small vignettes as well. And it got me thinking about how I do them, and often the environment is often what tells the story more than the figure sometimes, because the figures can be pretty static and you don't have a lot to play with if you're just doing a single figure, whereas a diorama you have more going on. So yeah, and I've been since COVID, I guess I've done more. I've got more into it. The more I'm producing, I think the better I'm getting. So yeah, that's me basically.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for that. So as I've just put a ticker on the bottom there, you'll notice that if you are watching and you've got any questions as we go along, then please pop them in the chat with a Q at the beginning so I can spot them, and we can ask anybody. You can ask anybody anything. So, right. So I've got a couple of. So what I did to format this is I sent 10 questions basically to these guys, so they know roughly where I was going to go with the chat or the conversation as such. And all we're really going to do is we're going to discuss the build we're going to make, or I'm going to make, and the different elements of it. I'm conscious of the fact that Bill isn't here, so I don't want to go too far, but also I don't want to hang back either. So we'll plod on, and hopefully he'll be with us shortly. So just a question to all of you, really. You sort of touched on a little bit there, Rob, in relation to the story side of things, if you like. How important do you think the role of storytelling plays in the approach of a diorama, or even figure painting? And how would you decide what moment of time to capture?
I think it's very important as a to put context in what you're presenting to people. When people look at something, they need to. You want them. You might not get them to like the subject as such, but you need to give them something to zone in on. Talk time of year. Is the figure? Is the person hot, cold? Where are they? Have been fighting long? Have they been in the field for long? All that kind of stuff. Are they young, old? You can convey that in painting and maybe grand work or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's and that can tell a story in itself. If you're then converting a figure to tell a story on top of that, or putting figures together to tell a story, it gives you more scope because you can then expand on that story. But a single figure in time, you need to do more than just put colour A, B, and C on it and leave it and plonk it on a wooden base. If you can do something more to put it in the context of the viewer will kind of realise what's going on. You don't even need to put a title on it. Potentially, people can get a figure of what's going. Does the figure itself tell you a story? Do you need a title? You don't necessarily. I don't think. Mainly because I'm lazy and never get around to putting labels on them. So my figures don't always have a label to say what they are, but you can get a feel for what they are based on how I've makes sense.
Yeah. How about yourself, Martin? Where do you stand on that?
Well, to me, I think the storytelling is the be all and end all, because if you don't have some kind of story attached to it, this is for me personally, it's just a model. And I think you can define storytelling in the widest possible ways. I mean, you can do just a vehicle, for example, but the fact that you've got chipping on it, you've got muddy footprints on it, you've got weathering on it, it's telling you a little bit about the history of what that vehicle's been through, what the crew might have been through. Is it damaged? Have they seen combat already? Is it brand new out the factory? And so on. But different people have different approaches. With my dioramas, I like to leave something to the viewer's imagination. I mean, that's possibly going to be available to you in what you're doing. It may not be.
Yeah.
But I like to not have a conclusion. So the viewer can look at it and imagine, well, are they going to make it out of this? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? So to try and draw them in a bit more. But I think storytelling is absolutely key.
I mean, my point of view has always been especially I like dioramas, so I don't class myself as a dioramist, but that's sort of my mindset, if you like. So for me, the story is everything, and for me, a story has to be not obvious. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is I prefer someone to go and look at it with their friend and look at the diorama and go, oh wow, look at this, and this happened, and the person that's, oh, I didn't see that, but this is happening. Oh, I didn't see that either, and all of a sudden you get a mishmash of interpretation, and I think it's really, really important to provide that level of entertainment within a diorama.
Yeah.
You can achieve it in figures. I hope Rob would agree with that sentiment to a point. But it's certainly with dioramas, a lot of people would say, oh, they like putting an Easter egg. They call it an Easter egg. So that little something that makes you stop and think about it. That for me is what I feel and consider really important as part of the story process. I'm not, the reason I deem myself to be that way is because if I build a model of a seeking, let's say, if I leave it on the shelf like it is, it's just a model of a seeking. It's not really telling me anything. If I put it on a base, there's something that's going to give me a little bit more to think about or to appreciate. So, that's my thought process. And certainly within the build that I've got planned, there's going to be quite a few of those moments within it. Some because what I'm attempting is it's the most complicated thing I've ever built. So it's can I reach that level or not? I'm not sure. We'll see. But some elements of it that I maybe should provide, I don't think I'm going to, because A, it's too complicated, and B, it takes away some imagination. And I think it's really important that some imagination is going to be used within this build. So, and I'll drop the hint. So to do with the explosion and the fire and that side of stuff, we can model that in a way in which, if we're lucky, we'll pull it off. It'll look like an explosion. Your brain says, oh, it's an explosion, not a problem. But it's a technique that's incredibly complicated, incredibly technically hard to do. Yeah. If I can take that away and replace it with a technique which is easier, but makes the viewer make the decision as to what's happened, I think is what I want to try and aim for. But we'll come to that in a little bit. Dave's got a question for you, Rob, actually. He says, from a figure painter's perspective, what do you use to portray wet clothing and cloth?
Good question. For me, I've got a figure I haven't quite got round to painting yet, and he's going to be a guy in Vietnam, and he's going to be sweaty. So it's going to be darker colour of the main color of clothing will be what I would do to represent on cloth. It will go darker. It won't be glossy or anything like that, because you won't see the wetness of it. You'll just see the deepening of the color. And so that's quite not necessarily tricky, but you've got to do something that you've then got complexity. If you're shading a figure, you're going to have the shading in the dry bit is then going to get even darker when it goes into the damp bit. So you've got sort of two levels of shading to do for every single crease that goes over between the wet and dry patches. So for it would principally be a darker color. If it's on a material that will repel water, boots that have been dubbined or whatever you call it, and they might appear a bit more glossy or semi satin kind of thing. So that's how I would plan to do this guy, to have dark. Or if he's walking through water, he's going to have a certain level of dampness that's crept up.
Yeah.
So that's how I intend to do him. That's my plan.
How about yourself, Martin? Have you come across that in your work so far?
Well, it's interesting hearing you say that, because I've got a figure I bought from someone we mentioned before, Barry Beeding, of an American soldier running through water in Vietnam. And I'm looking at starting that, and I was thinking the same thing, is how to portray wet clothing. And that makes complete sense to me, because for most people, if you're not experienced in figures, you're thinking, oh, well, I just use gloss paint on that bit. Yeah. But if you think about reality, that's not how it looks.
Yeah.
And especially when we're looking at, World War II, Vietnam, and so on, they're wearing cotton.
Yeah.
Cotton gets darker when it gets wet, especially if it's like, like a green military color. So, no, that's great advice from Rob. And when I come to that figure, I might drop you a line, Rob. Get some advice.
I've been doing things like, when I'm walking my dogs in the winter and mud or whatever it might be, I've been noting where the mud ends up on my trousers as opposed to the instinctive areas, or even something as simple as I've discovered from my own, if you kneel down in mud and then stand up, the area on your knee where the mud isn't where the knee was, because you pulled the trouser.
Yeah, because
it's those little details, the real world details that kind of, if you can think about that when you're doing these things, will probably ring more true with the viewer than you'd realise, rather than instinct would be, well, that's where his knee is when he stood up. That's where he got mud on it when he knelt down, but it's not, because it moved.
Yeah. I think people who do dioramas and figures need to have a level of observation that maybe other modelers don't have to the same extent. Obviously, they have to have it, but I think it's a great reason for keeping your eyes open when you're moving around, of just taking photos of stuff, like you say, noticing that, or when you see a car go by that has rusty streaks on it, taking a photo of where those streaks are, where the mud is, and not just imagining it when you're doing your kit without any kind of reference. Just noticing stuff, I think, is really important.
Yeah, transition. Again, walking the dogs. A transition from a grass to mud to where you're walking in the winter time. I was working on something from kind of a Hurtgen forest kind of time frame, and I was taking photographs of leaves in mud and visible,
how they sit, and
all that kind of thing. And it is surprising. You can almost a stylized kind of way of doing it, and there's the ultra realistic way of doing it, and some bits in between as well. So observation, photographs. I've got albums on my phone.
My phone is full.
So I've got really good at listing model projects in albums on phone, so I can find stuff quickly now. Once upon a time, it was like somewhere in here. Then
It's a good moment to just take a moment away from what we were talking about because Bill is in the background. I'm going to bring him in a second. Please, everyone that's watching, bear with us because obviously we've not had a chance to make sure our microphones are all working, all that sort of thing for Bill, and I don't want to be so cruel to him. So I'm just going to add him in, and hopefully it'll all work, clockwork, and I wouldn't have needed to say anything anyway.
Good morning.
Hey, Bill. Hey, excellent. Hey,
Sorry about that. I got my times a bit wonky, but
I think we may both have because as I introduced it 20 odd minutes ago, yesterday I noticed that the scheduling on YouTube was 4 o'clock, but the email I sent to you was 3 o'clock. So I just assumed I'd made an error and changed the schedule. Didn't think to all along.
No worries at all. Glad to be here.
But it's cool. We've got a little bit of feedback going on, which I would assume is playback somewhere. If you could just turn your volume down a little bit, that will solve that problem.
Sorry.
So, Bill, we've talked about ourselves a little bit and what we bring to the mix. And we've started on the first question. That feedback is still there. Not quite sure why.
Yeah, one moment.
Bear with me.
Right. I'm just going to do...
Have you got it on playback or anything?
No, I'm not, and I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from. Really sorry.
It's okay. It's not a problem.
I see Crazy Locas in there. Thanks very much for saying hello.
Yeah. I'll go through the chat while you're just doing that.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to work through this and try to figure out.
That's okay. It's not a problem. So yeah, as Bill just said, Crazy is there saying good morning to Bill. And he said, yeah, got my time conversion off of it too. I think we all did. And I think one of the lessons certainly from my point of view, in the 48 hours, I've never managed to do a time conversion correctly yet. So, and I don't know how many years I've been doing that. So, nightmare. Anyway,
I asked ChatGPT.
Yeah, do you know, they don't always get it right either. I've tried. Oh dear. I quite often say that when I'm using the computer, it's that there is lack of intelligence used from both the computer and me. So, yeah. But yeah, that feedback's still there, Bill. I don't know why.
Dang it. I'm just not sure where it's coming from. I'm going to turn off my sound, frankly, and see if that's it. Okay. Can you hear me speaking?
Yeah, we can hear you speaking.
Okay. Yeah, I can't hear a thing. So, and does the feedback go away with it's still there? Gosh.
Still there.
All right. I'm going to one
sure.
more try here.
Yeah, I've got nothing open here, so let me just I'm going to try something, Bill. I'm just going to mute you a second. See if that takes away.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, your microphone's picking something up there, Bill, I'm afraid. Wow. Bear with us, guys. Crazy just saying he Googled it too. Yeah. See, Google's not as bright as it seems.
Okay. Still there?
Yeah. Damn it. Yeah, it is, Bill, I'm afraid. Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
If I throw you out,
yep,
just reload us and see if that takes it away. Just make sure everything else is turned off, etc. Your mic's not too close to your speakers or anything, is it?
No, yeah, I'll even kick it back a little bit further.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something. Yeah, try that. Just
I'll leave and then try and get back in.
We'll get you straight back in. Don't worry.
Thanks very much.
All right, no worries. So for those of you who are watching, yeah, so sorry. Is that still there?
Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. The mystery of it all. Right, okay. Let me try something here. Maybe it's me. Right. Has that gone away?
That's gone
No,
away.
it's still there.
No, I can't hear it. Oh, a little bit.
I haven't really been able to hear any of it.
Right, let me bring Bill back in.
I can hear it.
You can hear it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear it.
Martin, have you got anything running other than the stream?
No, but I've got some headphones. Let me give that a shot. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Martin, have you got anything running in the background?
No, just this laptop.
Oh, okay. Dave's saying he can't hear a lot. I assume he was a lot of feedback. So, and the scale modeling twin says it's definitely there. It is definitely there, yeah. Bummer.
That's weird because it sounds normal to me. Unless it's me.
It could be. I don't know. I'll tell you what we're going to do. Right. Me and Bill will put our headphones on. That's fine. If I ask Martin, if you want to just drop out and then reconnect,
Okay.
and then we can just isolate it that way. I can't see on this end anything that's telling me it's anyone particular. So let's try that.
And I have got headphones.
You have got your headphones on, yeah.
Phone production thing. So.
Okay,
Yeah,
so is that a little better?
Oh yeah, that's good for you. Yeah,
it's gone. So it must have been Martin.
Perfect. I think it was me, but there we go.
It happens sometimes. Don't worry. It's not a big problem.
Yeah.
Let's get
Thanks
Martin
very
back in.
Did
Hey,
it make
Martin.
Was it different when I was out?
I think it was maybe you, but it doesn't matter. It's fine.
I can go get headphones if that helps.
You don't have to. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to.
I don't hear it anymore.
No, it's gone. Definitely gone.
Yeah.
The three of us have got headphones on. If you want to join us, put some headphones. That's fine. I'm going to talk to Bill quickly. That's fine. That's fine. So, Bill, welcome. First of all,
thank you very much.
Tell the audience a little bit about you and who you are and what you think you're here for.
Well, primarily what I enjoy doing at this time is building dioramas, but multi-level dioramas, something that's a little bit more in depth, trying to tell a story. All of my dioramas really, they're really about trying to convey a message or an emotion, or sometimes I try to tell a complete story within a diorama visually. And that's really what I try to do. It is a constant quest to try to make that happen. But it's, for me, this is really a big deal today, and why I'm here is I'm on with Martin and the rest of you as well.
Yeah.
I have been a fan of Martin's for so long, and how he sees small elements in his dioramas, how he constructs his dioramas. He's also a very, very strong storyteller in dioramas. And so that for me was a very big point to draw me further into dioramas. In building models early on, I always had a story in my mind as I was building the model. And until I started building a diorama, I wasn't able to get that story out. And when I started building dioramas, and then shortly after got to see Martin, how he builds dioramas, it just opened something up. and it said I can tell those stories that I always had in my mind while I was building the model. And I had the ability then to go ahead and create a setting, and then that setting added to the model, and then that whole thing congealed to make this wonderful story that when I figured that out, that became my quest. So these days, it's all about trying to construct visually engaging, full stories in a diorama, in a miniature setting, so that I can try to convey a message. So that's what I do these days. I am I guess a professional model builder, because this is what I do. And yeah, it's always now a consistent quest to try to find those interesting stories that are going to make a big difference in trying to put it in miniature. Something that can really get something across to people. And that's one of the things that I'm so excited about. The Akagi. What an amazing story to bring to life visually, so people can really live and get into that story the way that you have in your research.
Yeah. So the other guys may not know this. I'm not sure I told them, but part of the reason this idea bloomed into a roundtable was that Bill and I have had a conversation about the project in passing, which was a long passing, as it turned out. And then I said to him, "Oh God, I wish I'd got a couple of other people and had a discussion about it." So that was where the idea came from. So, but you've managed to answer the question that we were talking about earlier, that you missed, which was about the importance of telling a story. So one of the things in which I'd like to sort of go from that point is we talked about a question from Dave in relation to Dave Scully. He asked about portraying wet clothing and all that sort of thing from a figure painter's perspective. So from your perspective, Bill, when you're doing a diorama, how does the structure of the diorama, how do you structure the diorama to convey a chaotic moment, for example, like that we're going to have on this particular build that I'm going to be doing in the Akagi, the thought of explosion, and without overwhelming the viewer? What are your thoughts on how that might be achieved?
Yeah, and this is a great point, because a lot of times I think people go into a project and they say, I'm going to need all these figures, I'm going to need all these pieces, I'm going to need all this stuff, and then they start building it, and then there's a little bit of a question about how to present it, how it should be formed and put there to tell the story that they have in mind. And it's all about, for me at least, trying to make situations and connections between the figures and then the actions that they're doing within the scene. Martin, I'm sorry, Martin, I don't mean to embarrass, but I'm going to go back to you again and again and again. But early on, we talked, Martin and I talked in text and things like that about eye connection. In those situations, when there's so much going on, people are going to naturally look at the figure. They're going to try to see what the figure is doing. And if that figure is making a connection with another figure, that's communication. So it's literally just the heads looking at each other, or the expressive nature of the body and how it's frozen in movement and things like that. Those expressions are expressing the emotion, and people will pick up on that. You can tell someone's emotion. You can tell it not just by looking at their face. You can tell it by their body language, how it's shaped, and like that. So what I'm trying to do with those figures, I'm trying to place them in position where they're appropriate for the action that's going on. They're shielding away from a blast, but maybe they're also yelling at another person. And it's those connections, it's those literally eye-to-eye contact with those little tiny figures that are going to start to tell a story. And as you see more of those connections, as you see more of those little situations in your diorama, as you build them, you put those characters together. You know, you've got a group over here, and maybe they're talking and they don't recognize something is happening, but then you have somebody running toward them, one singular figure that takes that whole group and that singular figure and puts them in a situation where they're communicating an idea. There's danger coming. These guys aren't aware of it. So it's those kind of things that I think of. It all starts with the figures for me. The background, which is the setting, the depth, the basic place that everything's going to happen, the scene, if you will, that is going to add to everything and fill out and flesh out all of the different things that are happening there. But it has to start with those figures. You know, if you have an explosion on a deck with machinery and stuff like that, even if the machinery is moving and stuff like that, it's, you look at it and okay, that's it. But once you add figures, once you add that element of communication, people making eye contact, trying to give instructions, moving in a certain way, that draws you in, and that's where the story really starts. In my mind, at least.
So, Rob, it's all down to you and the figures. What techniques are you going to throw at this then?
Well, I was kind of, funnily enough, just as you were saying that, as this whole thing has been, you know, we've been talking about it over the idea when you invited me, thinking about how you would do this, how Bill's exactly right in figure storytelling, but in the chaos of the moment, in the drama, there is going to be a lot of extreme emotion. There's going to be, extreme emotion, shock. I was thinking as well, even the physical touching of one guy on hand on the back of somebody as the thing happens, sort of like that. These people work together. Suddenly that world is turned upside down, and a hand on someone's back as they're all shot. It's going to be how people look at each other. It will also be how they interact with each other in terms of the physicality. And I was going to say, you're going to have an issue with figures in terms of commitment. We talked about this already, I think, briefly. But commercially available figures, converting figures, what it might be. There are ways, even suitable heads, with the correct or an expression to try and find. I think we're lucky in some ways because the uniforms that the guys will be wearing are fairly simple. I think that's a bit of a bonus. The naval workers I think I found a few pictures of them, very, very simple. So that's a bonus. You haven't got people covered in kit and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
You mean you're dealing with at least that simple. But I've sculpted figures, and these are things to consider. And whether they're shortcuts to it, I don't know. But for example, I've got a figure which I've sculpted myself from scratch, and I've been mucking around with, I think you can see. So, for example, that guy is 100% sculpted by me, other than the helmet and gun.
Wow.
And then just to illustrate how that is being done, here's one work in progress of another guy. So he's a wire armature, and I'm using, this is epoxy sculpt, but I've used Magic Sculpt. So this is kind of the Tason Harms approach, as it were. And just to illustrate where that began, that's there's different ways of doing it. So this is a 1/35th scale figure. Different ways of doing it. You can I solder the core and then put Magic Sculpt or an epoxy putty to create this. And then, just as you were talking, I had one already, and I was kind of in the process of this guy is shocked.
Beautiful.
And that gives you more scope in creating a action placed figure kind of thing, as opposed to but it's ambitious. I'm not going to say that's the way of doing it, but it's not impossible. I mean, I think I've got back up here. So what I tend to do is use a
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
thing like
Yeah.
that, and I stick on wire, brass,
Mhm.
and then solder it over top of that before.
Nice.
In fact, as a 48 scale one I've done.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You can see where the burns are from using soldering and all that kind of stuff. And also, you're thinking of, you know, I think when I first read your proposal about what you want to do, my brain got overloaded a bit and I had loads of questions. And you know, one question would be, are you wanting to, are you making one key side as the visible side, the viewing side, or are you going to have lots of sides to view it? Because you could end up with having better figures, detailed figures towards the front, and then incidental supporting cast at the back, which you don't have to do
Yeah.
so detailed. You can, you know, have them simplified. Yeah,
Yeah.
just tell you, but have the dramatic story bits towards the front, kind of thing. So that's
Yes. Yeah, so if we go back to one of the image I shared with you, so you can see from this image that the explosion and the fire is right in the middle of the diorama. So you know, it's really the peripheral part, the outside stuff that is what you're going to be the hard bit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't want to do it like that at all. So and one of the reasons I'm sort of laughing and looking at Bill is because that was the first question he said to me when we had that conversation, and I said to him, I hadn't really thought about it too much, but the natural size of it, we're going to end up with a scenario where the island is of the main build coming down a couple of decks. So that's going to be a solid side because it's going to have all the compartments. So yes, there's going to be that side.
Yeah.
But the other three sides are all going to be open and visible.
Okay.
God help me. And if you remember correctly, I said to you, looking at this picture again, the one thing I really loved about this picture, that I didn't do it as AI. I just wrote into an AI program, this is what I want to do. Make me a 3D image, and this is what it gave me. Yeah. And the inspiration I got from this, which was phenomenal, I got to be honest. I'll talk about AI in a little bit because I've learned an awful lot over the last couple of months about it. But the one thing I took from this picture was you look at the way the flames and the explosion all reflect on the surfaces of the people, and all. That's what I'm going to do. So you're not going to see the explosion at all, because what happened was on the real thing, where the island is on the model, of which I can show you because this happens to be the actual deck that we're going to be using.
Wow.
Not that it's big in any way, but this part here, this part here is the island. So it's a great big island that sits on top, and then underneath, as you can see, there's a curvature here. So underneath here, there is the hull of the ship comes out to almost in line with the island. So there's a little bit of a lip over, and then it starts curved. So there's quite a lot of hull on this side. But then, of course, this side is the cutaway. This is inside. You can view. This is the other side. So you can see all that. Anyway, when I'm busy spinning it around, which is a bit of a pain for you. But if you can imagine, the island's now there, okay, and there's a line in the deck here, and the reason is that just here, where my hand is where the lift mechanism is for bringing planes up and down to the flight deck. Now, the bomb actually struck the other side, so right on the lip of the furthest part of that lift. Right. So the explosion didn't actually happen in any part of this that I've got. It's all over here somewhere.
It's off camera.
Which is great, because that now means I don't have to do the cotton wool and the explosion and all that stuff. All I need to do is convey the fact that there's a bomb blast, heat, and light. That's all I've got to do. So it's all about the painting. Now, obviously, those that know, I've been doing a little bit of OSL painting recently, been scared stiff of it, tried it. I've done it twice. I did it the first time and absolutely fell in love with it, thinking, I can't believe I've avoided this so much. It's not that hard. It can be. And what I did, I needed refinement, which I haven't got with me anymore. I've actually given it to the person that I bought the model from, bought the figure from. So it's now on their display. So yeah, so to answer your question is that the three sides will be open, and because of the nature of the beast, it's a 1/35th carrier. So it'll be 1/35th Kate and Zero will be in it. There's only room for 2 aircraft, 1 on each deck. I might put some other bits in of aircraft, maybe. I'll see. But so you're not really going to have an awful lot of room. So you're going to have you're still going to have that on the outside effect of people and the stuff at the back where you can not take the time to be quite so overwhelming about what you're doing with the figures. But it'll all be about, certainly on that first hangar deck, it'll all be about the light effect. It'll all be about the fire. On the lower deck, it didn't pierce that deck. It only pierced the flight deck into the first hangar deck. So underneath, this is where we were talking about earlier about having a story that evolves as you look at it. Underneath will not have the same paint effects. It will have completely different paint effects because they'll just be looking, going, what on earth was that? They'll know. So you've got different elements there in which you can talk about and say. And when I was talking to Bill about this, one of the things in which really excited me about it was that we were talking about, because I said to him, I said, well, I don't really want to do a smoke effect. It's going to be a bit problematic. But one of the things that happened was the reason it caught fire and was so devastating was that the whole of the hangar decks were full of vapor, full of fumes, etc. It pierced the tanks where the fuel was, and the vapor from that then went through the ship like a dose of salts. How do you model vapor? No idea. Never come to a conclusion, and I'm not going to do it because it's just far too complicated. However, the initial moment when that bomb explodes, there's a massive push of air, isn't there?
The shockwave, yeah.
So the shockwave, we can model that super easy. So we're looking at things falling over. We're looking at the lights hanging from the ceiling at an angle because of the power of the force of that. And one of the things I said to Bill as we were talking, and literally it was Bill talk this come up, was we were talking about on the flight deck. What would be going on the flight deck? And I said, well, not a great deal. There'll be an explosion up, but it wouldn't. You're not going to see that. So how do we make sure that everybody knows that story's going on? Really easy, is that you make a couple of figures on the flight deck, or the figures on the flight deck, showing the impact of that shockwave, of which potentially, if you're on the flight deck, right? Let's think about this for a minute. So I'm on the flight deck. That's my job, to be on the flight deck. I see this American plane coming in, going, "Oh my God, what's going to happen? He's dropped a bomb. What's going to happen?" And I've watched it. Oh, it's hit us. It's gone in. You're not going to be standing up going, "Oh." You're going to be lying on the deck going, "Oh my God, help me." The shockwave is going to push this person off the deck. So now we're looking at a figure that's on the deck, that's hovering above the deck somehow because of the force of that blast. His colleague is shutting the blast door on the island and struggling to shut it because of the force of the thing that's not going to, the force of the blast isn't going to trap him as he tries to shut it. And then obviously you've got the figures on the island themselves, which they're all going to be in different stages of going, "Oh, I can see what's happening there." People that are looking that way will obviously be ducking, maybe. Those that are looking a different way will be sort of in shock, ducking, sort of say, "Well, hang on, what was that?" The people from the bridge may be looking around the corner going, "What? Oh, did it miss us?" "Oh, you go, it didn't." So there's lots of elements within that diorama that we're now going to talk about when we build it. So unfortunately for me, I think Robbie's probably right, because the only figures I've got are these. So we've got one here which is some troops running, and I've got a tank crew. So I can get heads, not a problem. I can get heads shouting and hollering and screaming and that sort of thing, and I can swap things about. That's not a big problem. But unfortunately, there's going to be an element of sculpting, I feel. I don't think I can avoid it. Either that or find someone that can make them and 3D print them and save me the trouble. But there you go. So that's the thought processes of where we're at so far. Let me very quickly just go have a quick look at the chat, and then we'll reflect on what we've just talked about there. I did notice this earlier. Phil said that's some nice work talking about your sculpting there, Rob. Yeah, thank you for that. Crazy's saying the pinhole view or versus the multi-angle. Yeah, well, I think we've established that. Ian's there, the rally chef model shed. He's saying, afternoon chaps, listening in as I drove back home from the Northern Model Show. Parked up to type this. Good, I'm glad you're not typing while you're driving. Well done. Crazy's just jumped in there and said, so have to convey the blast wave, but not the flame part of it standing, etc. So yeah, so that's a way in which I hope I'm going to avoid doing that cotton wool explosion effect, which means also the other side of that as well. I've now cut away any LEDs. I'm not going to have flickering lights and any of that electricity. The only electrics I may have will be from the lights hanging from the ceilings in the hangar deck, which I potentially suppose I could paint that if I needed to, but I'm just being silly now. I think a little LED, not too strong, will give me the illusion, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create the illusion of the events that unfolded at that moment, 7:42 on the 4th of June, when that bomb pierced the deck and exploded in the hangar deck. Martin, you look like you want to jump in and say something there. Go on.
No, I think 3D printing might be the easiest way to do it if you can find someone who can do figures and stuff. And just going by what's been said as well, one factor to remember is that you have Asian faces. Now, I'm impressed that you've found 2 sets there that can help you, even if their uniforms, as Rob was saying, their uniforms might be too involved for deck crew, but the proportions of the bodies might be right. But I know Hornet do a series of Asian heads, some of which have quite good expressions on them. So that's going to be really helpful. But that would be, have you had a thought about numbers of figures that you're going to have in there?
No. So no, I've not decided an optimum layout of and placement of everything. So the plan for me right now is, I've shown you the flight deck there. Now I've made that part of the kit purely because I've cut the baseboard and I've cut the other bits of wood that I'm going to need for the structure. And I alluded to this in a conversation before we went live, that the aim is that obviously underneath the island on my diorama will have an element of compartments. So every hangar deck would be the equivalent of 2 decks. So in that part, there will be 2 decks, which will show different compartments and maybe a walkthrough or whatever. But that's going to be a bit of an illusion in itself, because obviously this is, if I remember correctly, 570 millimeters long. So it would be impossible for me to show you every compartment within that distance, which is great, because what that means is in the middle, in the center, gives me a solid area where I can create the ability to create 3 levels. The importance for that is storage. And the reason I want to do it that way is because when I built it, it will not be stored as a full model. It will be stored in 3 layers. So you'll have the flight deck, you'll have hangar deck 1 deck, and the main base. So when the idea is because of the size of it, it won't go to very far, but it's going to Telford at some stage. I will show it at Telford. And the other goal I have is to take it to a European show at some point as well. So it needs to be able to be travel. So the idea is to create the base with all the framework for the compartments, and also the roof structure of the next layer, but not the actual deck itself. That'll be one part, and then the next deck will be literally the deck that sits on top of the roof of all the metalwork, which is all going to be made out of plastic. There's going to be some magnets involved in there as well, which will hold the next layer on a little bit. But that compartment that's hiding will have the ability, I don't know, I haven't quite figured it out yet, but maybe to screw something in to just keep it taut.
Yeah.
Because then that counteracts that balancing act of the weight. And then obviously the next deck up will be the main flight deck. Again, that can all sit together and hold the model together, and then we put the island on the last time. I have discovered since I decided that we would do it that way that might not work quite as well as I think it will, because there's a little bit of complication when you get to the island at the top. But I think we can get around it. But we've got the ability to have a column, effectively, if you like, at the back. Although it won't be a back, because you can walk around it and look around all the way around. Everything has to be visual all the way around it. But we'll have that structural element hidden away. That's the idea.
Yeah. I think what Bill was saying about interaction between figures is super important. You've also got the possibility with your scene of having little indicators, little cues, like you said, like the light at an angle, people being thrown. One of the nice things I like about dioramas is having a diorama where the longer people look at it, the more they see. And all these are little intricate parts of a big story, but they mustn't overpower the main story. They're just little things just to enhance what your main crux of your story is. And then the multiple levels, again, like you said, the bottom level where the explosion hasn't hit them is going to be shock and horror and pointing up and wondering. And so all of these things will direct you towards where the main crux of the story is. So wherever you look, it's bringing you back towards the central part of the story. And thank you for all the nice things you said to me. And whenever I think of really intricate, involved dioramas, he is who I think of.
Yeah, me too.
Like your World War I stuff, just mind blowing. But
thanks very much.
It's going to be it's a massive project, and we will have to keep you on track. When I first started, I tried to do a 3-layer diorama of Resident Evil, and I had plans for elevator shafts and a battle on the surface and all of this. And 150 zombies later and 40 figures later, I went, I need to stop. But you've got a plan, and I would definitely suggest with something as massive as a project as this, is seeing each section almost like a separate diorama and a separate kit, separate build.
Yeah.
So just little bite-sized pieces to make the whole thing. And if you feel like, as may happen, a loss of mojo at some point, like this is too much, and the good thing I find about dioramas is you can switch focus. You're doing something, and I've had enough of doing this vehicle. It's just go and do some figures.
Yeah.
Do some background stuff. There's so many different areas that you can work on separately, so that you don't get bogged down and don't feel like it's too much doing one thing. So,
Rob, you put your hand up.
I was going to say, you're talking about absolutely each one being a separate diorama, but so your flight deck's going to have a different set of stories going on to the other layers, so the guys who are hearing or being hit by a shock wave without seeing the explosion, they're always shocked and kind of what's happened, we don't know, kind of thing. But even within each of those layers, there's going to be several vignettes happening, so you can have, and that will help with your focus, because you can work on one vignette, and you might decide to say, well, each layer is going to have, say, 3 main vignettes happening, and then some, like I've described, as a sort of like extras happening around, which aren't so critical, but will add a bit more depth to each layer. And I was just thinking, and you might see me fanning around, I've been basically the school of Pete Usher in terms of
nice. Look at that. Yeah.
blue tack guy.
Yeah.
I would suggest fanning around, making several of these, even if they don't have to be anatomically fancy or anything, but you could, get a rough idea of what a story with, say, 3 figures might be interacting together, or 3 going over at the same time. Photograph it to nth degree from all angles. And sketch it even, and that kind of stuff. And so if you do end up, get those out on, in the physical form somehow, so that they're not sitting in your brain as well, because that can be quite frustrating to have overloading your brain with loads of different multiple projects. So blue tack, Pete Usher, the classic way of
that's a really good tip. Really good tip.
And the other thing as well is that I dug out my very old Shep Payne book, but it talks about go for the extremes of motion if you can, off balance and all those kind of things. So they're kind of really handy things to help tell the chaos of your story, the chaos, the drama of it. So these things went into my brain.
I mean, they're great valid points without a doubt, and there is going to be a lot of extremes, but to try and help people in what's in my mind and translating what's in here into that is going to be probably my hardest task, because that will always be a little bit different to that. But the way I looked at it, I've described it that you've effectively got 3 layers that are all at different stages of realization of doom, if you like. And to reflect on that was part of the reason why this whole project went through my head to start with, was because obviously at the time I was going through a health problem. I'd had 3 heart attacks. Who knew what the future was giving me? I got to go for this operation, etc., etc. So I've experienced all of these things. And to translate that into a diorama seemed quite logical to me. But it also, in realization, you were talking about splitting it down into different elements and vignettes and all that sort of stuff. If you think about it, as you look at this model, you've got a layer right at the bottom here where they don't quite know what's going on, because they know they're under attack. They can hear all the weapons being fired and the explosions and near misses, the thud of the bombs dropping in the water either side of the Akagi, because there was only 3 bombs ever dropped on it. 1 hit, 2 hit went either side. 3 different aircraft was all that attacked it. So there's an enormous amount of stuff going on. That's not including all the pressure that they were under, because their captain had instructed them from the admiral, because it was the flagship, that they needed to stop what they were doing and change all the armament round, because they got it wrong, and they were concerned that the attack that they needed to do on Midway Island, they couldn't do a second attack. They needed to go and look for the carriers, etc. And they were all in such a pickle, such chaos. And then you go up to the second deck and you've got all this explosion and all this stuff going on, and again, a reflection of what's underneath, but still in there. Come up to the flight deck, and what you may have not realized is actually that explosion, that second deck, is actually like a mirror. So everything that goes on below it will be reflected above it. That being, there will be people that are in the flight deck where the explosion is, the blast wave, etc. There'll be others that will have complete no knowledge whatsoever what's going on, because they just won't know. They'll be so busy concentrating on what they're doing that they just won't realize. So to try and capture all of that going on and reflecting it all across the model is going to be super difficult and really easy to muck up. But you're right, eye connection and that sort of stuff is going to be paramount. I just want to quickly look at we're bundling through so much stuff, so I just want to make sure I've said hello to everybody and all this stuff. I just want to quickly go back quite a bit. Dave said, where do you find your inspiration and how do you make the inspiration of the diorama? I haven't asked that question, but I will come back to it, Dave, because I think we're sort of discussing it as we go along in this particular thing, but we will come back to that. Obviously, Mr. Marley in Australia has gone to bed. I don't know, loser. Who needs sleep? Love him. But he's going to catch up later, so I know he's going to hear this, so that's fine. We got Junkworks coming. He said good afternoon. We got Plastic Alchemaz. He's saying good afternoon. Oh, a little bit of chat between each other. It's lovely to see that. Joe. Now, Joe is, I don't know if you guys know Joe. Joe McCluskey is one of my inspirations. If you want to talk scratch building, this is the man to go to. He's just way out there. If you want to understand how to make a 1/48 radio transmitter out of nothing, that's your boy. He knows this. He's really good. I'm going to try and get him on one of the round tables at some point. But hi, Joe. Crazy's just saying half a cup of cocoa. I'm thinking of Mr. Marley. Half a cup of coffee and a wonderful conversation into soon be working day. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. What else we got here? Workday seems like a lot lighter after this crazy. Oh, it does. You're right. Anyway, let's talk about ourselves. That's fine. So let's quickly go back to our hit list. Bill, you may not know this, but Graham Pearson was going to be here doing all this hosting, but unfortunately he's been taken on well today. So about sickness. So hopefully he's watching. If not, I'll catch up with him later. But best wishes to him. So a question to all of you, going back to our little thing here. When working on a large scale or multi-decked diorama like the Akagi is going to come across as, how do you balance realism with artistic license, especially the interior space, etc.? So that's to all of you. Who wants to jump in first? Bill.
I'll jump in. Sure. The thing that I think about is, the story. So everything goes with the story. I almost rely on the model itself to make the realism the base. That's the base. And that's where the realism comes from. These hard models you're making, a tank, a car, a plane, or whatever. There's your reality. And then to make the figure seem real next to that, you mentioned it. It's been mentioned multiple times. That figure has to be doing something. If you've got someone reacting, but they're just like standing there and reacting, but there's nothing around them, they're not physically doing something that they're interrupted by because of the explosion, because of the things happening on the deck, then it seems like they're just being placed there to be up. Just, I needed a figure. So it's making sure that every single figure has a job or is doing something, actively engaged. They're not standing around waiting. As you said, they're changing armament. They thought they were going to be going after, a column, and then they were going to be bombing on land. And then they changed their minds and they said, oh no, we've got fighters coming in. So they had to change up all that armament. So there's going to be stuff laying around. There's going to be a lot of debris, like you said, confusion. But I think for me, in this sense, the interruption of doing something is going to really be a big part of making it feel realistic. It's all of a sudden this happens. Trying to model it is the hardest thing. But I think without that, you're not going to get the feeling of the impact, the feeling of why is this person's face grimaced? If we're not showing them being interrupted by doing their job, that I think is a very, very key part of it.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on that a little bit?
I'm just thinking, on the top flight deck, although it was only 3 aircraft that dropped bombs, there was still aircraft knocking around, I would guess. So,
yeah.
So you might have at least 1 or 2 people still looking up in the air to almost saying, well, that's where this all that's going on down here came from up there.
Yeah.
So some people might still be looking at that, because although that's happening, and the destruction of the boat in time, they're still aware that there's some, there is a threat potentially. So
Yeah,
you might
absolutely.
have people looking up as well as. Is there any anti-aircraft stuff in the kit around that area, or is it just is it
So on the island, it's on the island itself is mainly spotters.
Okay.
There are a few machine guns, bits and pieces, but they're very light machine guns. All the anti-aircraft elements would have been on the side of the ships. They had very poor cover actually for defending against aerial attack. But you're right. There will be. What you got to remember is that the people on the island would have been spotting, and regardless of whether that plane was coming at them or leaving, they still would be spotting. They'll still be saying, "No, shoot it now, because if they can get it after it's dropped its load, whether it's hit or not, it's one less plane to deal with next time." So they're all still. That's what I was trying to say was that earlier was that the I'm hoping that we managed to get a mirror image of reflection of diligence and working, etc., throughout that build. And also, to a point, I guess, again, creating the illusion, not the actual physical explosion, allows me to also split the model in half. So the element nearest the explosion would be all shock and awe, but the other side, there should be, I hope, a degree as you go through the deck of realization stroke, I'm doing my job. So you get to the far end, they're all doing their job. They're concentrating far too much on what they're doing, because they're going to have their sergeants and all the rest of it shouting, hollering, come on, hurry up, we've got to get these planes out, la 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 la. So they're all going to be super focused. So again, you not only got a vertical mirror, but you'll also have a horizontal mirror to a point, and certainly much more on the bridge, on that island, because the people in the bridge, they won't know. There will be someone hanging out the door going, oh, got it, yes.
You could have two spotters looking up and the third turning in horror because they realise what's going on, kind of thing.
Yeah. So that within those little scenes and all the different elements, and I mean on the island itself, I think I'm right in saying that there is at least 4 different areas on the island which effectively are their own story, but they must reflect to what's the overall story, if you know what I mean. So if you think of the island that's got 4 stories, you've got a story on the flight deck, because there won't be a plane on the flight deck. There wasn't at the time. So it'll literally be 2 figures. That will be 1 story on the flight deck. So that's 5 stories there. Then when you go into the hangar deck where the explosion is, you're going to have a facet of different stories going on. And then when you go into the next layer, there's going to be another facet of, I don't know, I've not mapped it out, but I can envisage there's going to be another 5 on each layer story wise. So you've got 15 different stories to tell within that space. And like I say, you can divide those stories in a way in which they are reflecting of what they were doing, what they are doing, what could potentially be going to happen, all within that different areas. Go on. Oh, Martin, sorry, hang on, I've muted you. There we go. Go on.
Yeah, I think the balance between realism and artistic license. Obviously, realism is important because you have a factual event that happened, and I know you say you hate doing reference work and whatever, but you've got the basics of it. You know exactly where the bomb hit. You know what that's going to do for your layout. But I think the storytelling is more important than the realism past that point. Not to worry as much with exactly what the interior of a Japanese aircraft carrier looked, if you could even find photos of it. But roughly, take an idea from those plenty of pictures of American carriers. But to not let that be so important that it restricts the storytelling. That is key. And whatever you build, you're going to get somebody who will say, well, they didn't do it like that, or they had this. It's always going to happen. Doesn't matter. Doesn't even matter how much background reference work you do. Somebody is always going to have a different idea. Just ignore that. Do what works for you. Make the story the key, and as realistic as possible, as accurate as possible within reason. But I don't think it should be an overriding concern. Personally.
No, that's fine. You're right. You know, see, I'm going to potentially blow your mind a little bit. Bear with me just 2 seconds while I do a little bit of admin. So I can tell you what's happening. So basically, Graham's literally just sent me a message and said, "I'm so sorry, I've just woken up." I told him to go to bed, which he's done. And he's so gutted that he's not here, because he has been so super hyped up about doing this. I can't tell you, because he was the first person I spoke to about the idea, other than Bill, because he happened to be there when I had the idea. But anyway, right, cool. So just to blow your mind a little bit more, so we're talking about research very quickly. I hate doing research, and this is where this story takes a slight another twist, in the fact that it's in my favor. So because of the nature of the subject we're talking about, i.e. the Japanese, the records and blueprints of their builds, their ships, etc., are non-existent to a point. So I'm very fortunate that I had this friend called Al, and Al helped me an awful lot. So this was the first thing in which I managed to get from Al, which was just a rough idea of how big this beast is going to be. So if you ignore the normal deck crew, because that's not going to be part of it, but you can tell by this that overall it's going to be over 300 millimeters in height. Each hangar deck is around the 135 mark in millimeters. So overall, it's going to be quite a beast. So that was a rough idea, and then I said, well, you know, give me a bit more idea of what it could be. What I could be looking at here. So he drew this for me. He's a wonderful guy, right? Now this is nowhere close to what it's going to be like at all, because there's so many errors. It's ridiculous, but it gives me a really good idea of the structure of the story, of the not the story, the scene that I want to build. Yeah, so that helped greatly. And then I will drop the link in video. I think it's in the video description on YouTube. But then this turned up in my scouting, which was this. So this is the Akagi. This is the island. And as you can see, where the poles are here, that is where the model finishes. So that line that goes across there, just underneath the ladder, is the line that I showed you on my flight deck. Okay, so this picture doesn't show you the hole that's just off to the right hand side, but you can see underneath the island what I'm talking about. You've got your decks there, you've got your 2 decks. That would be your equivalent of your hangar deck, but you've got the quarters underneath the island. And then this wonderful wonderful thing then gave me the interior of the Akagi, because it's a 3D video of a tour of the Akagi and the interior of the hangar decks, etc. So it's given me lots of visual ideas of which I can incorporate or maybe use or steal or anything like that. And this actually is a video that is on YouTube right now. It's done about 7 months ago, I think, and it was for a video game, I believe. But those are the sort of images in which I've been working with for the last 4 weeks or more, I guess. But bear in mind, I've been researching and thinking about this for near on a year, right? So, and I'll tell you how this will come about is that I was sat there and I was talking to a friend at work. I was working, honest. And I tapped into my laptop through ChatGPT. Can you tell me what the beam structure that held the flight deck up would look like on the Akagi? And it came back almost word for word with, there's no evidence or anything I can base this on because it's just nothing out there. And I'm like, well, I knew that, but that's why I asked you, right? So I sarcastically wrote, and I mean in full English sarcasm, really, I'm so surprised. Maybe you could have a guess at it, given the fact you're so intelligent. And that's all I wrote. It came back with 4 pages of information about, well, it would be right that we could assume that it would be da 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 da. And I'm like, what? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I'm sat there reading this thing, just falling off my chair, going, I can't believe this. I've been researching for 7 months. I've got nothing. I've got like 2-3 images. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and basically what they said was, you know, I already knew that the Akagi was a battleship. It was built as a battleship, but because of the treaty they signed, they had too many of them. So they converted it to an aircraft carrier. That's why the Japanese had 5 or 6 aircraft carriers almost straight away, because they couldn't use them as battleships. And initially, the Akagi had 2 flight decks. Weird. One that they land on the top, and the one they took off on was the second one underneath. Right? And then they refitted it again and did it how it was before it sank. So loads of information in that respect, but no blueprints. So I'm really fortunate that I hate research, and I've picked a subject that there's nothing I can research. So that's where I can go. The realism is that's how I see it might be. And my mate Al says I'm about right. So yeah, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, if you ever get a spare moment or you're stuck, and going back to Dave and your question about where do you get inspiration from your dioramas, we've already covered this in what we're talking about with this diorama, but also, as Rob alluded to, if you're the sort of person that walks around and sees things, you'll pick little elements up that you'll go, oh, I could base that on, I could use that. I mean, Rob's got an album on his phone of wet knees.
True that.
He has. He's got. He goes around photographing people's wet knees. It's very awkward, isn't it, when you're with him? But yeah, inspiration's all around you. If you keep your eyes open, it'll fall over you. You'll fall over it rather. And ChatGPT is a great tool. Don't ever knock it. Yes, it can take over the world and all that sort of stuff. I know that, but if you have a seed of an idea but you're not quite sure what to do, whack it in there and let it talk to you about it and talk it through. Because I can tell you on my ChatGPT, I've got about 40 odd different conversations, and none of them are the same. There's a few elements that are quite right, you know, consistent, but there's quite a lot that's not. And especially if you start doing pictures. Yeah, very frustrating when you just get that picture. You go, oh, that's so close. That's so what I want. Try that again, and it's completely different.
Yeah,
but
that's frustrating a bit.
It can be. It
Yeah.
can be. But yeah, I've gone off on a tangent. So yeah, luckily, realism side is that the only thing I can do as realistically is concentrate on the emotion. You know, make sure the 0 is painted in the right color potentially. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like doing it, is because, you know, I might not have the right color for color green, for example, but I've got a very close one. And you'll always get someone to go, oh yeah, but yeah, green's not quite right. And you know, there's thousands of pictures out there of the same vehicle in green, all 30 of them sat together, and not one of them match. So you just have
time of day, you know, all
Yep.
things are going to make, you know, those changes. I just, not to interrupt, but I did want to add one thing. You know, we've been dancing around this subject for quite a while, but when I'm figuring on that story and trying to tell that story and trying to kind of construct that story in my mind and all the different vignettes that go through it, I really think of it like I'm trying to make a set, a movie set or a stage set, something theatrical. I am trying to take that artistic license typically further. I'm not trying to create something for a, you know, maybe a museum or something like that, but these are the hard facts. I'm really trying to make it so it's interesting, so that you want to look at it, so that you want to understand the story, so that you want to, maybe even after you're done looking at the diorama, you maybe go and research it a little bit because you did find it so engaging and it did draw you in. So to think of your diorama or to think of your creation as you're making a little movie has helped me greatly. And even to the point of, should I deviate from what I understand is real life to tell something that I think is very important or poignant in this story that maybe isn't there? That's where the artistic license for me takes over. And I say, yes, I'm going to do that. I am going to add something that maybe didn't happen, but it illustrates that point so vividly. I think it's important. So I will add things like that, or I will, like you said, change a color of something. And sometimes on purpose, because to get the point that you're trying to get across, I think you have to go beyond that. And I think if you restrict yourself to say, no, that's not accurate, or that has to be like this, you may not be able to get that point across, get people engaged to understand the story you're trying to tell. So I have no problem going with that artistic bit of a reach, away from the history. I don't want to change history, but I want to get the things across that I'm really trying to get across.
So, Rob, one of the things in which I thought was quite prevalent and important to ask you was, and I'm sort of picking your brain as well while I'm doing this. So obviously we talked about the explosion and the fact that we're gonna make the explosion all about painting. Have you got any tips in relation to object source lighting and the processes in which you might use for that when you're painting?
I think one thing, assuming you might do a lot of construction before you paint. So I think with your Soviet sniper, loading it into a graphics program of some description, and I think I did this. You sent me pictures, and I added some extra lights and whatever, and where I thought some of the light might fall. Doing that is quite a handy thing to do, so you can visualize it before you even apply paint to it. So photograph it with a good light source, even to indicate, you could put a lamp on the bit you've made, or the wall, or whatever it might be, and then start adding color with a, if you've got anything like that, or I can help along the way, where you think that light would be. And even if you're going to do object light source, you're going to end up with shadows as well, which will also convey direction of source as well. So you're going to have a figure, or even if you've got any of the rearming stuff going on, trolleys or whatever, that's going to have a light source on it as well, and that'll be a bit behind it. I mean, I do it on all my figures, although most of them are conventional light coming down and all that kind of stuff. I do a shadow between their legs on the ground. It's always darker, as if there is if you're going to put a light on top of somebody, that can have a shadow underneath. But in a single figure or whatever, you might even notice it. But you change that light source, you're going to have that shadow going somewhere else behind it. That idea of taking an image of something you've made, and you might go, oh, do I want to add a little bit more light there, or whatever it might be it object source or be it whatever, putting it into a software package. The one I did for you was Procreate, which is a really good, cheap app for iPads and things. And if you look on YouTube, there's a guy called Eric Swinson, who is a phenomenal figure painter, probably one of the best in the world. But one of his things is both painting source lighting and also the shadow. He puts shadows into a bust, even something as simple as that, from a nose coming down at an angle, and makes it. It's a tricky thing to pull off, but he does it. But he also does a Friday night. He puts figures into. It's a feedback Friday. He puts figures into Procreate that people have said what do I need to do to improve this? And he'll colour in and put bright highlights and things on the photograph to illustrate where you could improve it.
Oh,
and
nice.
that's quite a good way of
Cool.
Yeah.
helping yourself, even on your own things. If you get it so far and you go, well, what else could I do? Could I just put a layer on it in the artwork and then, you know, brighten it somewhere and go, and that might change the whole visual cue for you when you're working on it. So that would be my number one thing before even applying paint. And then when you actually get round to actually applying it, be brave. I think it's going to be the thing here. I think we're going to have a level of artistic license going on because you've got to convey your story. So not worry about it being a bit rough and ready around the edges to start off with. You've got to physically put stuff paint on it to see how it looks and go, does that work here? And then show it to other people to go, is it working for you as much as it's working for me? Because you're going to be engrossed in it.
Yeah.
Now, are you fully painting your pictures or your figures prior to doing OSL, or are you using the OSL as the primary paint on that surface?
I haven't done a lot of it, but when I first did one, I kind of painted it and then tried to do some object source lighting.
Got it.
What I'm doing now, I would go straight in and put those lights in dramatically straight away. I would go, right,
okay,
put a highlight here. I wouldn't be trying to render every surface perfectly. I would just get the lights in where I want them on one side of the figure and then neaten it up afterwards. So you're looking for the dramatic effect before you go back in and refine it and render it and make it all lovely.
And that's where that Procreate would really help out, because then you would it's almost like doing zenithal. You know, it's showing you where you're going to put things. It's showing you exactly where you have to put those colors. That's a great point.
Yeah.
See, sorry, Rob. The reason I'm confident talking to Rob about this is because I did a figure of a sniper that had moonlight and a glow of fire, so two different sources.
Wow, yeah.
And initially I was like, oh, I think this is going to be really, really difficult. So all it was, I did a figure that I just base coated it in a black primer, and then Zenithal it from one direction, which gave me one of the options. And then I got a UV light torch and used that as my other direction of light and took a picture of it.
Nice.
And it worked for me. I'm not saying that's the best way of doing it. It's just that's what I used, and it worked very well for me. But one thing I learned from that process, and also I've done a bit of painting with Rob through Models for Heroes. We did a figure last year, I think it was. And watching the way he does his figure painting, he does it so differently to how I used to do it. And it's all about thin layers. So thin layers of color and paint, etc., which most figure painters will tell you. I've never really quite worked it out. I never quite understood it. But the one thing I did learn from that process of doing the objects source lighting was that if you go in with the harsh paint, let's say harsh orange on the figure, that's where the fire is going to be, the rest is shadows, etc. Then you're going in with your light, very light, thin coats of paint, building up the colors around your glow of the fire. And then that, to me, means it's quite easy to blend that in. I'm not really good at blending, don't get me wrong, but it gives you the ability to then blend that in a little bit more. And if you need to, you can go back and add some more if you need to of the first color you started with. But it gives you that build up and the shadows quite easily. And that way that Rob, that's certainly what I picked up from watching Rob and the bits I've watched with him, how he does things. It's turned my figures completely up on their head, because I used to put the base color on, go, yeah, it's green, that'll do. I want to put some shadows in, so I'll put a bit of black in. And like I said, I'm not good at blending. I'm not good at blending at all. So bringing it back to what I'm going to be building, in answer to your earlier question, Rob, is that the idea is I'm going to start with the base. That seems a sensible place for me to start. So I've got 3 bases effectively to build. And then I will create the object's source lighting. So I'll decide where that light's going to reflect through the hanger deck, which will be rough and ready. It would literally be a spray of some harsh color and see where it lands, basically. And then I will leave it, walk away from it, and go and do my planes and some figures and stuff. But I've probably done a little bit too already, because all that beamwork stripe and rivets and bolts. Oh my God, thousands of rivets and bolts is going to drive me nuts. And fish plates and all the other words in which I've learned and never realised they existed. So yeah, that will give me a really good base of where I'm going to start with, and literally all I'm going to do, which might not be the right thing to do, but my vision is that I'm going to get that deck. I'm going to put the flight deck on top, and I'm literally just going to get an orange and an airbrush and spray.
And just,
that's it.
Yeah.
And where it lands is where it lands. But bear in mind, that's going to be the color. It's going to, it's not going to be the final color. It's going to be the color. And then when I take that flight deck off, obviously getting to all the metalwork is going to be a real nightmare. But I'm going to have to get in there and paint, etc. But I can see where I'm going already. And obviously that paint's not going to reach, I don't think, will reach the full length of that piece.
Yeah.
So that then gives me the dilution of that light, hopefully, in the steelwork, which I can then reflect on the stuff going underneath. That's my thought process.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. So we let's quickly have a look at the chat, because I did see a couple of things. Crazy just says a great point there from Bill. So Crazy's got a question, which I'm not sure if we've answered or not, but I'm going to read it out. So would it be easier to think of the overall as the main story and break down each deck level and side as individual vignettes with sub-stories told by objects people from there? I think we covered that, right? Yeah. So yes, basically this diorama is half a meter wide, almost a meter tall. It's going to have 15 different vignettes plus in there, which make up the full story, hopefully.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as well. If you're going to have a vignette, if there's any way when you are composing the vignettes to then link those vignettes together somehow, it could be something on the ground, it could be two people communicating between those vignettes, or it could be a rope, or whatever it might be. But yeah, to get the eye to go as people are reading your model to go through these visual cues from one to the other, and it will lead to something else and all that kind of stuff.
It's really important for me that we make sure that the continuity is pulled through the whole model. And the only way in which I think I can do that is by using the constant. Now the constant is the Hulk of the ship. So somehow I must tie all the elements so they don't look like individual vignettes. They look like they're meant to be part of the whole thing. But if you take the time to look at it, you'll go, oh, I didn't realize that guy's eating a sandwich. What a strange time to be eating cucumber sandwiches or something, there's all those elements. It's not easy to do, and the genuine honest from me is I don't know if I can do it. I'm going to give it a go, but we'll see. And yes, Rob's right. There will be an awful lot of me sending pictures to people going, what do you think of this? Because that's what I do anyway. But yeah, there'll be an awful lot of that. And I know from Bill anyway, definitely. Bill's already basically said that he wants me to keep him up to date because he wants to be input in. And that's the other side of this whole build, this whole story is this is a way of me saying thank you to everyone for the last year supporting me through what's been quite an interesting journey, of which I'm still continuing. But all of my friends, all of my colleagues and my acquaintances have been around me in some form helping. As a volunteer for Models for Heroes, I've helped numerous people by just sitting making models, nothing more. But when I fell ill, they were all there reflecting that back to me, which is priceless, and I need to thank them. So they're all involved in this journey too. You guys are involved in this journey. Anyone that's I get involved in or walk past that shows an interest, they're involved in this journey. It's not just my journey, it's everybody's. Anyway, I get all emotional. Joe, my lovely Joe, he says he's got a question. You may have covered it. Other than internal structures and or aircraft, are you planning random equipment or and or items? For example, fuel storage, spare parts, engines, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, there's going to be lots of that sort of stuff. And given the moment of time that we're choosing to depict in this diorama, there's going to be loads of that lying around all over the place because they haven't got time to put it away. But they're too busy swapping out the bombs for the torpedoes and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, and also something that I learned from my little research that I did was that most of the Zeros were actually providing air cover at the time, although there was one in the hangar that was under repair. That's lucky because I only want to build one, so that can be under repair. So that's good. Let me just make sure I've covered all the bits I wanted to cover here.
Just a quick thought entered my
Yeah, go on.
I had a nose about what this here thing looked like at the time, and there's lots of futons attached to the outside of the tower, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Let's think we don't know what was inside it because there's no photographs. Would there be any futons inside the deck itself somewhere? You could have some, maybe they were being brought upstairs or something, and so you could have those just as something else in the hangar deck areas, just as something populated.
I mean, I don't know for a fact. I don't know for a fact, but I would assume, given the process they were going through, they've just literally finished their first wave on Midway Island. They've had a limited amount of success. They're in the confusion of swapping things out because they've been caught unawares of the trap that was set for them. But there's going to be an awful lot of, almost to a point, there may even be celebratory things lying around where they can't use the celebratory things because it's all going terribly wrong. There was a thought process I had of, if I can portray it, and there's a way of doing it, which there may well be, is having someone being treated for a heart attack. Just a little Easter egg that I might be able to pop in there. More than likely something like that may have happened. Certainly someone would have been injured and being treated, even in the course of before that explosion happened. I don't know. There's no record of it 100%. So, but yeah, that's a good point.
Someone just clutching in that moment, kind of like, hang on.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's lots of elements in which I've not disclosed or told about that I am thinking of trying to include, which reflect to the other side of the story, which is my story, my health, my journey. Because this is part of the reason why it's called Fire on the Rising Sun, is because the explosion happened on the flagship of the Akagi, the Japanese fleet. When I was told I'd had 3 heart attacks was just at sunrise, which sort of lit a fire under my arse to change a lot of things in my life. So seemed to limitly match together. So just one more question to all of you. What advice would you give modelers trying to include emotional weight, historical accuracy in a project inspired by a real event? Basically, we sort of touched on it a little bit. Rob, do you want to jump in there first, or?
I'm just trying to think. Any event has a timeline to it, and so it's choosing that timeline. Yours, for example, is a bomb has gone into the deck, it's exploding, and it's that split second where it's happening. I mean, I've been giving this some thought. I'm kind of interested in a particular. This is the result of getting online and discovering podcasts, I discovered a unit called the 52nd Lowland Division, a particular Scottish units from World War II who were supposed to be going into Norway, I think, originally, but ended up, and they trained for mountain warfare, and they ended up going into the Netherlands, into the Scheldt, and they ended up fighting right across Europe. And a particular guy, on a side note of the Al Murray We Have Ways podcast, got me into this, partly because they wore camouflage smocks, which you don't see on other units. They look a bit like British Paras, but they've kind of got the Brodie helmet with a camouflage smock with a hood, which is a very different look to everyone else. So it's kind of an aesthetic appeal. But then learning about a guy called Danino, I think, who was he's from northeast of England, and he won the Victoria Cross, but he was in this unit, and he was anywhere between 4'11" and 5'2", 3. He wasn't a very big lad, and he was 19, and he won a Victoria Cross, and I want to capture him winning the Victoria Cross. And he's a little lad who ended up picking up a Bren gun in the end. So a Bren gun's going to look quite big on a small vehicle. So you're trying to find that point in that story to convey the heroic thing he did, and at which point do you do it. And so it's, to find where do you get that most emotional power to his story. That kind of thing. You kind of, I haven't pinned it down yet, let's say it that much. So you're looking, and I'm going to, being a figure model, I'm going to try and do that in a single figure, as opposed to a diorama telling the tale. So is it when he's picking up the gun? Is it when he's charging with the gun? Is he going to have a helmet on? Because he'd already been injured by that time. How far do you go with showing the emotional aspect that he was wounded, he had a head injury, without being gratuitous stuff? It's loads of questions you want to answer, and you've got to find that moment. So any event is going to have a timeline. You've got to find that point which is going to resonate with the audience at a maximum point. So I know I can't start waffling a bit now, but find that point in a timeline that you feel conveys the story you want to tell. I think would be what I'd say.
Okay. How about yourself, Bill?
Well, I very, very close. I agree is basically what I'm trying to say. When I do a diorama, I always want to put emotion in there. And so I try to make one point in the diorama very emotional, because once you spark that emotion in the viewer, then they can start assigning emotions to other places in it. So I try to concentrate on fear or joy, those two things. I try to show a figure in extreme fear, something like that, because that's so visceral, people pick it up immediately. And then they can start assigning more subtle emotions like, acknowledgement or questioning or something like that. People will automatically assign that after realizing you've put emotion in your diorama. So I just try to start with those two, either fear or joy, because they're so easy, I think, to convey. And then the rest of the emotion, those subtler emotions, your viewer assigns as they look at the rest of the diorama.
To a base emotion.
Yeah, get to the base and make it very apparent. If they're scared, really show them scared. Over, kind of like when you were saying in the book from Shep Payne, the extremes of movement and stuff like that. But do it with emotion. Show an extreme emotion right up front, in the diorama. And then that will help portray emotion throughout the rest of the diorama, where it can be much more subtle.
Yeah, good points. Good points. Martin?
Yeah, really good points. Something I add and I try and do in mine is to create tension, have some drama. And to evoke an emotion in someone, to have them feel that, something's going to happen or is about to happen that is pretty major to these characters. And how can I show that? One of the things that I've done in the past is I've had an ambush situation where I've had, a group of German soldiers with a tank moving through Budapest, and they're right into an ambush. And there's Russians hiding around the corner, and you can see that they're tense and nervous from their body position and angle. And the Germans are completely oblivious, and you can see that things are about to kick off. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. Again, that's for the viewer to kind of extrapolate in their mind and to imagine how the scene's going to go. I've just done one now that is a Russian T-34 coming over rubble in Berlin, and there's a little Volkssturm boy, a little Hitler Youth with a Panzerfaust, who's a little guy with glasses on, and he's trying to figure out how to work this thing as this tank is coming. And his mother is running in with a white flag to try and pull him out of there before he does something stupid. You don't know if they're going to make it. I mean, I've called it wasted lives, but are they going to die? Is the tank going to get blown up? We don't know. But there's tension there. There's fear and drama, like you say, Bill, on the mother's face. The kid is, actually, we mentioned Barry Biedinger. He looked at it in photos and was like, yeah, not sure. Figure doesn't seem like he's in a good position for what's going on. And then when he saw it in person, he was like, no, that works. He's oblivious. He doesn't understand the gravity of the situation.
Right.
He's fumbling with this thing and doesn't realize how bad things are. So you want to pull people into your diorama. And, we're talking about little sub-stories and stuff. Those things are all super important. And it's also important to make sure, as you said, that they are linked to the main story, that they're not completely devoid of what's happening up. Because your midway scene, your Akagi scene, that is a huge catastrophic event. There's no way that anybody within a reasonable distance is not going to know something big is going on. So although you've got your separate stories, there's still that link. And so my advice to people getting into dioramas is what I did is I find something that really excites me, a situation, a battle, something that I've read about, sometimes in a book. And that's inspired me several times to make a diorama after reading something you feel passionate about and have drive over. And that passion will come out in the diorama. We don't need to see more dioramas of just a tank and two Germans pointing with a map. It's been done to death. Do something different. Do something exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, the one of the dioramas I did that I got a lot of passion out of, a lot of pleasure out of, and it's the only diorama that's allowed in the house because it had that same effect with the wife, she doesn't mind me. Don't get me wrong. She's not somebody that tells me what to do or anything like that. She supports me really, really well. Loves the fact I do model making. Really enjoyed the series that I did on YouTube with it. And she's been moaning at me for ages, saying, "Why don't you do something like that? Why can't you get that same kick that you got from that last build, which was 3 years ago plus maybe?" And it's really difficult because part of it drained a lot of energy out of me, but also because the scene I chose was inspired by a true event in that in the Normandy landings, an American GI got caught up on his parachute on a church outside of a church.
Yeah.
But I've always said he's probably not the only one that happened to. It's probably, well, I know for a fact there's many people that have gone through roofs of houses in different fit states, some on fire. Certainly on that particular event, people did fall into the house that was on fire at that time.
Yeah.
So I did a diorama of a paratrooper that come through the roof of the church above an altar. And his friend looking at him going, and the reason I did that was because I didn't want to do the hanging outside the church thing. It's been done loads of times. I wanted something different.
Yeah.
But what inspired me for that diorama wasn't real life, wasn't the parachutist. It was a line in a film. And that was a film which was a line from a a president of the United States about the Gettysburg battle, where he was writing to a mother who had lost 5 sons.
Yeah.
And he said
Yeah.
something along the lines of he was feeling anguish for the sacrifice that she had made and the sacrifice that had been made on the altar of freedom.
Altar of freedom. Yeah.
That resonated with me. That's what that diorama was about. And the connection is the title. That's emotional for many Americans. Also very emotional for people that know the historical aspects of that. Having a figure hovering above an altar of a church stirs all sorts of things up, more than I'd realised. The fact that the person that's hanging was pale-faced and clearly dead. The figure had sorrow. So you had 2 figures showing base emotions, one of death and one of sadness. But then in between them was the emotion of loss. So you got all those elements going on, and I didn't even realise I'd done that until I stood at Telford listening to people looking at it and their interpretations of what they were seeing.
Yeah.
And I was astonished at some of the things that were saying or being said that weren't even made in the model. They were nowhere close to the model. They were just assumptions that people have made from that initial, oh wow, look at that. That's so it's that. It really is as simple as that. A word or a sentence, it can be your inspiration, and it's how you interpret that information as to what you could then go off and do and build a model to. Yeah. So that harks back to that second question from David again, in relation to where you get your inspiration. It is literally all around you. It's just how you interpret that stuff.
It's interesting what you say about people having a different viewpoint from your build. I took a diorama to a competition, and they didn't have it split into vignettes, dioramas, and so on. And there were some big, expansive, really good scenes, and mine was actually quite small, and it won. And one of the judges came to me and he says, yeah, I'll tell you why, because we really like the way that you did this, this, and this, and drew it into, and had everyone pointing in this one direction, putting all the focus. And I'm like, I didn't say anything. I'm like, really? Is that what I did? I had no clue. But that's how they saw it. And you can never tell how people look at your work and perceive it and make their stories up from it. It's another reason not to make it, just black and white and this is how it is. Leave things open. Let people
one of the reasons I hate research is that argument that always comes up with any model, be it a figure, a model, or a diorama, and that's not accurate. That phrase, that's not accurate. And the builder's like, well, yeah, but I did it from a picture. Well, that's not the picture. And it's like, yeah, but wait a second, just take a moment. Are you standing in the exact position that picture was taken? As you look at that model, are you standing, well, how do I know that? Well, just look at it. Are you just slightly to one side? And like, well, yeah, I am, but that's not the point. No, it is the point. When you take a picture, what's in that frame could be completely different by 3 steps to your left or right.
Yeah.
You just don't know. Your diorama where you're talking about some soldiers hiding, if you turn that slightly, that image is a different story. If you're looking from the where you can't see their figures, well, it's Germans going through a street in victory, in just carrying on their victory. Nothing's going to happen. That's pretty boring. That's what I mean. That's what I like about dioramas is that you don't need to do the research. You just need to imagine what that might resemble to you. Build it, and then show your pictures and stuff. And someone somewhere will go, oh, wow, this is what that means to me. You'll go, oh, I never did that. That wasn't what I did. But yeah, let's quick to the chat. I think we're almost done. So we have been talking for a long time. I'm sure we'll talk for a lot longer. But so let's have a quick look. So we've got the Flying Dutchman. He says he recently built a diorama, but couldn't catch the story in one scene. It was related to a historical artillery event. So he cut the story in 2 scenes by slicing the diorama base diagonally by the forest. He says it kind of worked, having the artillery crew on one side and the receiving end on the other side. and made it a rational diorama. Yeah, sounds like a good idea to me. Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, that's a great thing to finish on, Joe. Thank you. So he says, yeah, it's all about the illusion. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't like the word. I don't want to be an illusionist. I like dioramist. It sounds better because I'm not pulling flowers out of crevices. But he's right. It's exactly what it's about. It's about the illusion in which you give. And I'll hark back to Rob and figure painting. One of the things in which I didn't quite figure when we were doing figure painting was the transition in shadows and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes they're not blended. They are sharp and they are rough. And I hadn't equated that. I just hadn't. But also, if you've got a figure, which I don't have to hand, well, I use this one. It's a big figure. But if you use this figure, this figure looks like that close. But if you pull it away from you, it looks completely different. So when you're talking about miniature figures, most people look at a miniature figure from quite a distance. But if you hold it right up to your eyes, you'll see there's gaps in between the bits of paint, and et cetera, et cetera. But hold it away, and all of a sudden, it's a completely different thing. The same as light. If you're using an artificial light, take your figure outside in the garden and have a look at it at arm's length. Does it look right? Then go back to your bench. Because that takes me back to what I was saying about I don't want blue lighting. I've done lighting once. When I had it here on the bench, it was awesome. Amazing. Took it to a show. I might as well not bother turning it on. It just didn't work. It was there, but it didn't work. So there we go. Anyway, do you know what? We've done really well. We've covered all of those 10 questions without actually me reading most of them, which is exactly what I'd hoped for. So that's amazing. Graham has sent me a message and has apologized to us all for not being here. However, apparently his wife told him he was hallucinating at some point. So thank God he didn't try and be with us. I'm so glad that you've had some sleep. Go back to bed. Get well soon, Graham. And I know you'll be around for the next one. So before we wrap up, is there anything you guys want to add or put into the wrap up from your side? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first. I do have a bit of imposter syndrome being on here with these guys, but I mean, I'm hugely impressed at this project you've got in mind, and it's gonna be mammoth, and it's gonna take some real fortitude to stick at it. But I'm here if any time you want to chat, or as the Americans say, spitball. Yeah, I'm here to help. I'm also very jealous of all your workspaces. I like how you've all got your. That's my workspace. Yeah. As the kitchen.
That's when you.
Wow.
That's when you're lucky. Sometimes it's out of a suitcase.
Yeah.
And I have to say how impressed I am at what you achieve when you're out and about in your suitcase. And don't feel imposter syndrome. Bill's.
Well, that's one of the cool things, isn't it, about the way you work, Martin, is that you have to think about what you're working on. Whereas sometimes here we can have so many things in front of us that you get distracted by things. Whereas if you're when you're in your travels and whatnot, you've got to know what you're taking. You've got to, and maybe that's why you've got so many fantastic things done. That you've, I've got 20 projects up here that are probably midway being done. So. So
thank you.
It's not always the best thing in the world to have.
Okay.
No, it's not. No, definitely. I mean, thankfully, you can't see the top up here where all the unfinished things are, and some of the ones in the cupboard too. Rob, was there something you'd like to add into your role?
Well, very much like Martin as well. Too. I've never been involved in anything like this. All this is set up on a camera on a thing that I've wheeled in because I've never set up to chat in this way before. So slightly impostery, and everything I have done has been the other end. It's usually my hands painting something as opposed to me sitting here. So thank you for inviting me. And as Martin said, any way, any part of the journey, ask questions away. I'll partake and help along the way and keep you G'd up to go all the way, basically.
See, he almost agreed to do 30 figures, but I don't think he has. But never mind. No, that's great. That's great. Bill, how about yourself?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, you know, as someone who does longer projects and multi-levels and things like that, you know, you're inevitably going to come to that point. It just happens. And you're going to feel that, oh gosh, can I go on in this? And then you're going to have other things pulling at your time and saying, gosh, I'm a brand new kit and look how shiny the plastic is. Cut that away and we can just start all new. It is really that fortitude and having something that you have so much passion about, and you've put so much weight behind that's going to keep you, you know, moving through that. It will happen, expect it, and then you can get beyond it. And like everybody else, I'd sure love to be any kind of support vehicle that you need. Love to get back in and help, because it is an exciting project. And I think that everybody on the call and us as well, we just want to see it. You know, we just want to see you build it. It's a wonderful idea.
Me and you both. I can't wait till it's done. Or is that too early for that? Well, you know, guys, it's really strange, you know, as modelers, and genuinely, I'm not a top modeler by any means, but any of them that I've met all have the same reactions. All four of us, we're in awe of the people we're in company with. We feel like we're imposters, and you certainly aren't. Certainly from my point of view, definitely not. Very worthy of being here and having this conversation, and just the conversation. I mean, I'd advise you to watch it back, not because I want the views, but because I think it would be interesting for you to see what insights you gave, and that should quantify exactly why you were here and chosen to be here. Yes, I will involve you, and that was part of the deal when I wrote that first email to you to invite you, was that, you know, I want you to be part of this journey. This journey has no timetable other than I start at 7:42 on the 4th of June. That's the only point that's timetabled. Everything else, it takes as long as it takes, because it is a complex, very complex build. I will record it. I will put out episodes of parts in which we've done. I have a list up there of 15 different things. No, I lie. Actually, that's complete bullshit. 27 things.
Wow.
And they're all titles for episodes or something, and that doesn't include the other 12 that I didn't write on there. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to do from this project. I don't know what I'm going to deliver. I'm not going to lie to anybody that's watching, or you guys, or anyone that's involved. I don't know what I'm going to deliver. I hope I will deliver as much as I can, and there will be, I hope, at the end of this journey, an extra layer that you won't know anything about until the end. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being part of this. For those that are watching, thank you. To harp on to latch onto something that you said about being involved and all that sort of stuff. It just so happens from the 4th of June all the way through to the end of the year, there is a group build. Anything that is themed around the midway action. If you want to build a kit of some description, paint a figure, or just do a lovely scene of a mountain on a baseboard, whatever. If you want to get involved, come and get involved. It will inspire me. I 100% guarantee, no matter what you do, will inspire me to carry on doing what I'm doing. So please get involved in some form or another. That'd be wonderful. We have got planned, or I have, these guys don't know this, I have got planned another 9 round tables around this project. I have not planned them any further than writing down the ideas, purely because there are some other people which I'd like to hook in, so that when we get to the end of it, it'll be one massive chat. But I want to see how this goes and how you, the watcher, viewer, reacts to it. So leave me a comment in the video below and tell me what you think, and any questions you may have for us as a collective, pop them in there, and I will relay them. And I know Rob wants to say something.
Yeah, it was a thing that had crossed my mind before, and I guess in a way you've just answered it, even if it's not what you think it might be. A project like this, all of us who've had jobs and things, they'll talk about project management and all that kind of stuff, and planning and whatnot. And obviously there's planning gone into this. And although you might not have some fancy flowchart or anything, it sounds like you have, with your, even if they're just episodes of for YouTube, there is a plan along the way there somewhere. So you kind of answered that what, how much project planning goes into something like this. I mean, with me and my figure painting, I'll start something, and towards the end, I'll eventually make a list of the little things I've got to finish off. Otherwise, I'll get distracted or forget about them. So I'll have maybe 10 things at the end, like make sure you paint this, make sure you paint that. And so rather than lists and lists and lists. So it looks like you're doing that.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I treated myself to this when I was in hospital.
Oh, nice.
It's my first book that I've ever bought to plan my builds. I normally use scraps piece of paper.
Yeah.
But I use this because I was bored. So if you I've actually got this because this is what I bought for the hospital. But I've also got 3 other books. I've got another one which is very, very small and compact, which is an idea book, which literally you just jot down whatever it is you see or think of that might interest you. Really good to have that when you're somewhere which is giving you lots of inspiration, which is like a model show or something like that, or even a model shop for that matter. I mean, I've got paper strewn everywhere, which is really, really bad because my memory, one of the bad side effects of this whole event is that my memory is awful. Like I will forget what I even talked about an hour ago. I can't tell you what I talked about. I haven't got a clue. So it's not dementia. I have been tested for it, allegedly. But yeah, so yeah, that's what I did. I have here, I'll tell you what I've got. So I've got the roundtables. I've got 9 other roundtables that are suggested, and they're mapped out. They're mapped out. I've got 10 episodes, which will be the build episodes. That's the minimum, which will cover all the main areas of the build. I've then got what on earth is that? Oh yeah, Workbench Chronicles. Now that will be something in which I will do sporadically. I've got no plan for that whatsoever, but I have done all the artwork for it, so they'll go up at some point. They'll probably be short videos, a little bit like Bill does, to a point. Won't be quite as fancy, but yeah, it will just be a quick update. There is another set of things from the bench, which is more of a hangout sort of scenario where you can come and hang out live. I might do a couple of lives where I'm doing some building, which doesn't need to be filmed as such, but you can see what I'm doing and you can build along, and I'll have some guests that are building something similar or something completely different, and we can chat about, shoot the breeze, whatever. So that's there. It's like I say, it's not mapped out. It's just written down as a suggestion to myself. But behind that is a calendar for the next 3 months, which has got everything mapped out on it per day, with absolutely no intention of sticking to it. Because I know as soon as I do that, I might as well just not bother starting because it will be too much. And that's why I've not set a date of the finish. There is every possibility, if I'm lucky with time, with the way in which I do the filming and my wife and commitments outside of the hobby, etc., that I could potentially get this done for this year. However, I'm not going to set that as a goal because that's
it's a very aggressive timeline. Yeah,
Wow.
It's a very aggressive, and also that door behind me might open. I might get something thrown at me.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, there is that possibility. Certainly, I think with the base, the scenery, I think that's going to happen fairly quickly, if I'm honest. And I've been dying to get on. I'm so glad that I put those bits together, just purely because it meant I sort of started but didn't. but the thought of doing thousands of rivets and bolts on fish plates and what, that really doesn't excite me at all. And if you are watching this and you happen to have a file that is a 3D printing file of bolts and rivets, let me know, because my 3D printer is sitting there doing nothing. It'll save me a lot of time and effort. So yeah, there's lots of facets to it. There is a bit of merch as well. If you want to get involved, you're more than welcome. Every bit that certainly from the merch side of things, just to make it clear, that will go towards the build, and whatever's left over will go to Models for Heroes. So that's how I see it. I don't expect anybody to buy anything, but it's there. But yeah, I think we've covered an awful lot of ground, guys, you know, and your input has been amazing. Bill, I think we can safely say this was just as informative and exciting as our conversation we had previously, right?
Absolutely. Better. Much better.
Hey, so I'm glad we did it. For those of you who've been watching, thank you so much for spending 2 hours with us, sitting around nearly 2.5 hours, sitting around the fireside, chewing the fat. It's been amazing. And like I say, all the links you need are in the description of this video. And if you can't find something, drop me a line on the Facebook or Instagram or all the other different ways. And I will no doubt interact with you and let you know what's next. So the plan so far is that I'm going to go live on the 4th of June, just before 7:42 for some strange reason. And that's when the build officially starts. It won't be very exciting. It will be beams. I'll be doing the beam. Now, if you want to see me in a leotard doing beam work, you're more than welcome. But that'll be a completely different channel. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being with me. We'll probably carry on and have a little chat in a minute or two. But for everybody who's been watching the stream, thank you so much. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll speak to you real soon. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.